Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her,
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
and this is Pixel Therapy.
Mm.
We'll start this episode with a little bit of housekeeping, like we do most times. I first just want to acknowledge that this episode is coming out later than we'd hoped
Yeah.
due to a myriad of personal life challenges in December
Yes.
that were experienced. So thank you all for your patience as we worked through everything. Reminder that this is not our Game of the Year episode. This episode will be discussing Jusant and Chants of Sennaar, and we'll be recording our Game of the Year episode next weekend to be released on January 9th. We're very excited to get into that. And hopefully January and beyond will be more stable months for us personally, and there'll be
Mhm.
less disruption. But we are just two people making this podcast kind of on the side of the rest of everything else in our life. So we appreciate everyone's understanding when we need to move things around and reschedule and bump an episode 17 times,
Yeah,
even
it's
though we really
fine.
want to talk about these games.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks
Thank you.
everybody. And sorry that this is coming out sideways. Patreon shoutouts. This is everyone who subscribed to our Patreon name in the credits tier at the moment. So that's a very big thank you to Genevieve, Lindsay, Pimhatai, CD Mess, Ava, Sammy, and Alexis.
The
Thank you all
squad.
for your support and for sticking with us despite all of the bumping and rescheduling and me putting up 7 Patreon messages in a day to say we're definitely streaming, we're definitely not streaming. Yeah, anyway, thank you all. It makes it all we just love making content for you all, so thank you for your support.
Yes.
Remember, if you want to get your name in the credits, you can hop on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can subscribe for free to get updates about our streams and public episodes, or for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to those monthly bonus episodes that we do. That's an exclusive Pixel Therapy Patreon bonus. For the month of December, we talked about this year's Game Awards on the episode, as well as the cozy turn-based RPG Sea of Stars. And it's worth noting that new subscribers to the Patreon do get access to the entire backlog of bonus episodes, which stretch all the way back to November of 2020. That's over 3 years worth of content
Damn.
at your fingertips for only $2. So if you're looking for a little more pixel therapy in your life, definitely come check out that Patreon page. Again, that's patreon.com/pixeltherapypod. And if you're looking for other ways to support the show, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, because every review there does matter for a small podcast like us. And you can also catch us streaming our Let's Play series, Pixel Therapy Plays, over on youtube.com/@pixeltherapypod, where we are live most Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, playing games like Alan Wake 2, Jusant, Thirsty Suitors, and more. So be sure to come on over to the Pixel Therapy Pod YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and click that little bell icon to get notified every time we go live here on
Mhm.
YouTube. And of course, after all that, know that no matter how you choose to support the show, we appreciate you being here all the same.
Yeah, we do.
All right, folks, it's time to get cozy. It's time to pull up an armchair and feel free to lie down on the couch. We're going to talk about our feelings. Spencer, despite everything, how are you
Well, my
today?
couch was almost underwater there for a minute.
Ah, God, what a
Yeah,
nightmare.
TLDR, a pipe burst upstairs. So thanks all for bearing with us as my partner and I came home to water pouring down from the
Ugh,
ceiling.
ugh.
Um,
A true
yeah,
homeowner's nightmare. I don't know if I
100%.
dread that happening, but, like, it's like the top 3 are like that, a tree falls on the
Ugh,
house,
mm, mhm.
or just roof repairs in
Foundations,
general.
yeah.
Foundation, yeah, foundation's pretty bad. I
It's
guess I'm
from
just more
below and
scared of
above.
having to,
Terror.
like yeah, terror from above and below. Yeah, but, just one of the trade-offs for being a homeowner.
Yeah, especially when your house is built in 1880.
Yeah.
Honestly, if anything, one of the contractors who came to take a look at all the flood damage was like,
Mhm.
honestly, if your house was like a new build and it's all like particle board and shit, like he's like things would be a lot more fucked. But you've got this old 100-year-old wood, and that shit will withstand anything.
That's
And so I
good.
was like, "Okay, that makes me feel a little better."
Yeah, one of the benefits to having an old as fuck house. I feel like there's not a lot of benefits to having an
Right.
old as fuck house. So
It's
glad
one of
that
the
it's
few.
glad that it's paying it forward in that one small way.
Yeah, 100%. So,
Yeah.
anyway, everything is fine, no one was hurt, and, we still are able to, have a place to lay our heads at night and play my video games.
The most
So
most important thing, the video games were not harmed.
Ah,
No video games were harmed in the bursting of this
yeah.
pipe.
No consoles were damaged, everything is fine, so and thank God, because there's nothing like turning your brain off and sinking into, a game to get out of the horror of that. I
Yeah,
did
love that
wanna
segue.
mention. Yeah, I know that was a
That
little
was very
sloppy,
smooth.
but,
No, no, it was perfect.
um,
It was perfect. Very smooth.
I did spend some time finishing Sea of Stars this past week,
Me too. It's so
which, oh
good.
my god, 60 hours, that's how long it took for
Yeah, pretty
me.
much me too. Pretty much
Really?
me too.
Okay.
Because you went through and got the true ending, right?
Yeah, so there's a neutral, quote unquote, "neutral ending" and a true ending. I had the dawning horror that, so it's like, you get to the neutral ending, and then there's some side quests that you can fulfill to unlock the quote unquote "true ending."
Mhm.
And throughout the game, you're doing this thing where you're collecting what's called rainbow conches, and it's just these
Ooh.
little rainbow shells, and there are 60 littered throughout the world, and they're kind of, hidden, like they'll be
Yeah.
partially obscured, or you have to go through some puzzling to find them all.
Yep.
And I remember passing by them and finding some when I could, but not spending too much effort trying to find them all, thinking like, "Oh, there's no way this little extra side quest that unlocks items here and there from a special merchant would be a requirement for fulfilling the true ending."
Yeah.
I was so wrong when I got to the end and realized I had only
Yeah.
found 32 of the 60.
Oh, no. Did you use a guide to get the
Girl,
rest of them?
I used a guide.
Okay.
I was like, "I don't know where the fuck I'm gonna have to start from the beginning."
Well, I know I did, but I have, like, no
Uh,
problem pulling that up when it comes to my trophy hunting ways. You're not someone who typically platinums or, like, trophy
right.
hunts, with games. So, yeah, how was that for you doing that's pretty close to 100%ing it if you do all the stuff for the true ending.
Yeah, I basically there's, like, a couple treasure chests I haven't opened, but for the
Mhm.
most part, this is the closest I've gotten to 100%ing a game. I will
Did
say
it
I
awaken
tried.
anything in you, or
Oh
you were
god,
just
no.
annoyed? So this
I
wasn't
think
your gateway drug to becoming a trophy hunter?
Oh god, no. I think if anything, it made me realize, like, I do genuinely enjoy this game because a less patient version of me would have just looked up the true ending on
Mm,
YouTube and called it a
mm,
day.
yeah.
But I was so in love with this game that I was fine with kind of retreading ground, and I think that says something about the game considering the fact that it has one of the more tedious fast travel systems. Like, once you're
Mhm.
in a map, you kinda have to navigate yourself to an escape point. There's no, like, fast travel from within a section, so it's like, "Okay, I've gotta figure out how to get out of this place and remember which area of the map it connects to." So, like,
Yeah.
I give the game credit for keeping me engaged. That being said, after I spent 3 hours in the town of Brisk running around trying to find this certain conch that all of the guides were showing, there's, like, this point in the game where the town gets destroyed, and so I was
Yeah.
looking for this building that literally did not exist
Didn't exist
anymore,
anymore? Yeah, you gotta find a good guide maker who notes, like, where it's at in
and
the
the way
other version.
to access it post-destruction is like, "Oh, by the way, this area that looks impassable, if you
Yep.
move your character along the edge, you'll eventually
Yeah.
find a secret door." I'm like, "Okay, I need a
Yeah.
guy."
Thankfully, there's only, like, a couple that they put in a spot where you have to basically be, like, I don't know, almost playing like a speed runner or something where you're just, like,
Mm,
running against the wall looking for the tiny little
mhm.
pixel gap that your character can squeeze through.
Yeah,
Mostly, it's they're just placed in a way that they're hard to see if you're not being super observant.
yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think that's part of the charm of the game. It kinda
Yeah.
had those vibes of, like, retro RPGs where things would be hidden in plain sight or just throwing yourself against the wall trying to find the cracks was like part of the joy of finding all of the game's secrets. So like part of me
Mhm.
felt very nostalgic playing this game, and I
Yeah.
kind of didn't want that to end. But I mean, for you as a trophy hunter, I'm sure by the time you did the neutral ending, you probably had all 7 of those pillars already lit up. But what was it like for you
Uh,
getting that true
well,
ending?
I didn't wanna open a guide until I'd gotten at least the initial ending of the game, and so
Yes.
I didn't use any guidance, like, before that point, but then when I got to that point and saw, "Okay, I've gotta finish these other quests," then I used the guide to get the shells and stuff, and then, yeah, I think there's just a few more trophies that you have to get beyond that. There's, like, one for opening every chest in the game, like, finding all
Mm,
the treasure, not just the rainbow shells, and that one got a little bit annoying. There's just so many.
yeah.
Um, Thankfully, if you are finding the rainbow shells, there is a tool that they give you. I'll just say it that way,
Mhm.
that helps identify that you can use to help learn what areas still have items left to
Mhm.
find. So that makes it a little easier. And then at that stage in the game, while you don't get a true fast travel system, you do get a way to travel that's much quicker. And you can
Totally.
just kind of go right to at least uh, yeah, I don't know what you would call that. Cause there's like the world is broken up into islands, and each
Mhm.
island has a map, but when you're moving on the large island map, it's like when you're traveling between worlds in Mario kind of
Right.
style, where you're just like you're just moving along these little fixed points, and you can still kind of jump between those points, but then once you go into the actual level, that's where you lose the ability to fast travel. So
Yeah.
I don't know. They give you things at that stage of the game that make it quicker, but you are still having to
Mhm.
go into each section, and so trying to find all the treasure chests was a little bit annoying. But really, I was never. Yeah, I was just so enamored with the game overall, and how enjoyable and like comforting it was to play, especially this time of
Mhm.
year. Like, I put in probably yeah, so right on literally on my birthday, but on the day of our lake stream, I rolled the absolute shit out of my ankle falling down a
Oh,
few
right.
stairs.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much just laid up Friday and Saturday. I had the days off of work, and we were waiting for some family to come in for the holiday. And I basically just laid with my leg up in the air and played Sea of Stars. And so
Mhm.
even though there were
Mm.
like a few points where I was like, this is a little bit tedious, it really never bothered me. And some
Mm.
platinums, sometimes when I platinum a game, by the time I actually pop that platinum trophy, I'm like, great, I am ready to uninstall this. And when I did pop the platinum trophy on Sea of Stars, I was still a little bit like, I kinda wish
Oh.
there was more here and there was more
Yeah.
story, but I absolutely love the true ending that you can achieve.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just a really heartwarming
Yeah.
game.
It's
It
got
was
one of
very
those.
cozy.
Yeah, it's cozy, it's a little bittersweet,
Mhm,
there's a little bit of sadness there.
mhm.
Ah, it just feels so good.
Yeah, and, like, some great themes throughout. We talked a good bit about, the themes in our bonus episode. I don't wanna steal anything away from the content there, but
Mhm.
I think as the game continued, there's also stuff that it's saying about, grief and trauma and how we
Mm.
process that, and then how that affects, I don't know, there's a lot that they do with the Moraine character, who's, like, the professor of the academy that our 2
Mhm.
heroes, like, were trained in, and how the trauma that he has experienced, impacted the way he was existing as a teacher, and thus impacted some of his other students, that
Mhm.
weren't our 2 main characters, and yeah, I don't know, how that stuff kinda carries down, and how you relate to and process your grief can dramatically change the way you approach situations, the way you perceive your purpose in the world. So, I don't know, a lot of
Totally.
beautiful stuff in there.
Yeah.
Great little game.
And there was one, uh, I had read that in the developers Discord, um, although I like anything else, I do think it would have meant more if it was actually explicitly stated in the game.
Mhm.
But apparently in the Discord, it's canon in the game that so like your party is kind of caught between this millennia-long battle between two basically godlike alchemists named
Mhm.
Rashan and Aferal. I don't know how to pronounce
Yeah, and
their name.
yeah, they
Um,
never there's no dialogue in the game, so we're giving it our best
yeah, it's all
guess. Yeah.
we're reading. Um,
Or no
but
spoken dialogue, no voice acting.
they're both sort of, I don't know, genderless, but kind
Mhm,
of like masculine coded. And
mhm.
apparently it's canon. The developers have said on their Discord that the two of them are lovers and they were
Yeah, I thought they might be
forbidden.
implying that, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Like part of the reason they sought to become immortal and become gods is because they couldn't be together at the time they were alive and were trying to become immortal so they could wait for a time where it would be more accepted. But then
Mhm.
things kind of went wrong, and hence this whole battle between them begins. But I was like, cool. Would
Yeah.
have been great to see that explicitly stated in the
Yeah,
game, but
they definitely
thanks.
could have made that explicit. I definitely could tell they were implying there was something more to their relationship, but at
Mhm.
one point I thought maybe they were like,
Yeah,
that they were
yeah,
siblings.
yeah.
Um, and then kinda got the sense that maybe they weren't due to, like, some other, like, yeah, very veiled
Yeah.
like, there's one point where, the one character is, like, talking to Rashawn and refers to Aferil, you said
Mhm,
was his name?
mhm.
Refers to Aferil as Rashawn's friend, and Rashawn
Right.
kind of, like I don't even remember exactly what their response is, but it's kind of like, "Yeah, friend."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And so it's like, "Okay, yeah, there is something else going on here,
yeah,
for sure," but, yeah, it's very, very vague.
but
Yeah,
I'll
they could have
take
made
it.
that more I'll take it, yeah. Just give that to me.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, meh,
but yeah, great game, great game.
mhm.
Anyway, that's not why we're here today, though.
It's not. Thank you for that segue. We're here to talk about Jusant and Chants of Sennaar. And, well, let me intro the games a little bit, and then I'll say a few words about why we're pairing these 2 up. But Jusant, for folks who, didn't check out our streams, we did 2 streams on Jusant if you wanna go back and watch any of the gameplay there. But it's a meditative puzzle climbing game made by Don't Nod, which is the studio behind the original Life is Strange games. And in the game, you play as a young person who's on a journey to climb an abandoned tower that's filled with artifacts of a civilization long past. A lot of exploration and exploratory storytelling. No dialogue, very quiet, meditative
Hmm.
game. The game came out on PC, Xbox, including Game Pass, and PlayStation in October of 2023, and has had a mostly really positive reception from critics. It's currently sitting at an 84 on OpenCritic and has shown up on several indie game of the year lists. The other game we're talking about today is Chants of Sennaar, which similarly also follows a lone wanderer making their way up a desert tower. However, in this game, in Chants of Sennaar, civilization is still very much present, as the tower is inhabited by several communities who have become isolated from each other and no longer speak the same language. Very much pulling from the story of the Tower of Babel. The game
Mm,
has said that in its descriptions, and it very much used that as kind of an influence for the set dressing of the game. The puzzles in Chants of Sennaar revolve around deciphering each language that you encounter as the player character. And languages are represented through logographic writing systems as characters speak to you in text based dialogue. And yeah, by interpreting clues presented through nonverbal communication, illustrated signs, and other contextual set dressing, you are translating the languages as you go through the game and using that to solve puzzles that the game sets up as you ascend the tower. Chants of Sennaar was developed by the studio Rundisc, and it was released on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, PC, and Xbox in September of this year. And it's currently sitting at an 82 on OpenCritic and was actually a Games for Impact Award nominee at this year's Game Awards. So those are the 2 games we're gonna be talking about. I think one of the main reason we paired these 2 up is they are both pretty small, like, kind of like you could beat them in a day if you wanted
mhm,
to, indie games. I think
mhm.
Jusant is, like, 4 to 6 hours, and Chants of Sennaar, it took me maybe 10-ish.
Yeah,
It's
like
a little
12
bit
for me.
longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um and both of them center, very interestingly around towers
Mhm.
in the desert, that you
Yeah.
as a lone individual are climbing without, like, a really strong sense of why you're climbing the tower
Mm,
that you kind of piece together as the game goes on. So there seem to
mhm.
be some, like, just thematic like, setting, connective tissue here between these two
Yeah.
games, which is the main reason we decided to pair them up and talk about them together. But
Mhm.
just to start, Spencer, can you tell me how much you've played of each game, what you've been playing them on, and like kind of your high level take? Let's start with Jusant.
Yeah. So I finished both games, both Jusant and Chants of Sennaar.
Okay.
Like we've talked about, I think Jusant took me about 6 hours and Chants of Sennaar took about 12.
Hmm.
I played both on Steam.
Hmm.
Jusant I actually played like keyboard style, which is like rare for me. Just wanted to, since we were streaming it a couple
Yeah.
times, I
Yeah.
figured, might as well. And Chants of Sennaar, Steam Deck, my BFF this year, the MVP of 2023.
Yeah, you've played almost everything on Steam Deck
I
this
love
year.
that thing. I fucking
Did
love
you
that
play Sea of
thing.
Stars on Steam Deck too?
You know I did. I mean,
You're such a handheld gamer. It's
I
so
am.
I'm tangenting us
I
like
love to
hardcore
take
right
it
now,
where
but
I
yeah.
love to be cozy with my games. But also I
Yeah.
think with Sea of Stars, it brought me back to the days of the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Color, and I
Yeah.
wanted to feel that kind of closeness.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause right here. Could you hear what's happening behind me?
Yeah, it's not bad though.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. um anyway, on terms of my high level take, I think besides the thematic parallels that you've already described, I feel like both of these games did such an excellent job of building deeply resonant narrative without any words.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
environment, in the mechanics, and in just the way that such lovable characters were brought to life with nothing more than like body language and music and the mechanics again. I'm just struck, like both of these games made me cry, and it's like they barely have faces, and I'm like connecting so deeply with these
Mhm.
stories. And so just, I mean, they just both really, like, I don't know, reminds why we love games, and why it's so important to fund smaller stories and indie creators, and not everything has to be like a triple A, like true to life, like super graphically intense cinematic production. Like,
Yeah. I mean, even as people who love those type of games,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I think just watching the massive layoffs in the industry this year,
Mm.
and I don't know how closely you've been following some of the information that's come out of the huge hacker leak that's happened at Insomniac, which like
Right.
is absolutely terrible. That Insomniac basically had a bunch of the developer of the Spider-Man games, among others, had a bunch of data like held hostage by some
Mhm.
ransomware hackers. And of course, they didn't pay the ransom and the data was released. Absolutely awful that a bunch of personal data was included in that
Mm.
for the developers. But there was also a ton of emails and marketing strategy plans and information about
Yeah.
their budgets and conversations with Sony and just so
Mhm.
much information that came out in this leak. But something that's kind of come out of it is just more understanding of how, first of all, how much money it's costing to make these huge, you could almost say these are quadruple A
Right,
video
right.
games, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars going
Mm,
into these year-long development processes to pay all of these people to do this work, and then
mm,
it's the the platform holders, the producers of the publishers of the games not wanting to pay that much, and whether
mhm.
that's it's hard to say right now if that is coming from a place of like, well, the CEOs need more money and we're not making enough off of these games to justify these rising costs, but like it is a huge financial cost to turn out games that look like Spider-Man 2, that look like
Oh,
The
yeah.
Last of Us Part 2, that look like these games do. And while I think they're absolutely beautiful, you can also do something so inventive with so much less.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm,
it just begs the question of whether or not those resources need to be allocated that way.
mm,
I think it's a
mhm,
fair question.
mhm.
But yeah, sorry, I derailed us again.
No, it's okay. Like you said, I think these 2 games especially are just really welcome reminders of how much you can do with a lot less,
Mm,
and how important those smaller titles are to the rich tapestry we have of all the games we have available to play. So
Absolutely.
thanks, developers.
Yes, thank you, developers. For my part, I'll toss in here that I did not play Jusant at all.
Mhm.
Like, did not get hands on a controller with that. I think I want to. I'm interested to hear more of what you have to say about it because I didn't get to see the ending of the game. I obviously was there for the 2 streams that we did on it, so I saw a good portion of the game, but didn't get to see the ending. And I think from everything I've read and heard you say about the game, it feels like the kind of game that you do have to physically experience to really get. I think
Totally.
we'll get into this more later, but it seems like a
Mhm.
big part of the connection with that game is the physical control of it and how you're interacting with like the actual controller or keyboard,
Yes.
whatever it is, and the game. Um, so I'm not quite sure. I mean, I have thoughts and stuff to share about the game, but I think my
Yeah, yeah.
connection to it is way less than my connection with Chants of Sennaar because it's the kind of game that I think just watching it is not quite computing in the same
Mm.
way. But that's where I'm at with that one. And then Chants of Sennaar, I fully played and beat on PlayStation. I platinumed it, and absolutely loved it.
Mhm, mhm.
It's definitely like one of my favorite games that I played this year. So let's get into it a bit. Jusant, story and themes. How would you characterize the story of Jusant?
Yeah, so I would say kind of if anyone's played Season,
Okay.
um, it's sort of this post or I guess, okay, Season is like impending apocalypse, but
Yes.
Toussaint is like shortly after an apocalyptic event. You are in this desert society, and slowly learn that it used to be covered in ocean, and this tower was rising out of the ocean that provided food, provided water, provided salt to cook and sell, and there was a very vibrant community built on this side of the planet. But climate change and it's not super clear how much human impact has been involved, but what's basically happened is that the planet has stopped turning. And so on one side of the planet, it's never-ending sun, and on the other side, it's stormy and darkness. And as a result, all the water has dried up, all the food, there's been a deep drought and lack of food, and most everyone has either passed or abandoned this area. And so you're trying to climb this tower. You're accompanied by a little friend. It looks
Little
kind of
guy.
like a whale uh cloud,
Yeah, it's like he's just like a little goop.
a little goopy guy. And yeah, I think there's in terms of themes, I think there's stuff in there around collectivism and society and different ways of imagining community and what community can look like in the face of disaster. Like there were clearly in the letters and remnants left behind, you see pieces of what the culture of this society was like and how people tried to stay connected to each other or were waiting for each other or trying to remember people who had passed and loved ones who maybe be hard to reach because some have left and while some have chosen to stay behind. And so you get little pieces, kind of like in The Last of Us, when you travel through the world and
Mm,
find
mhm.
notes from survivors, or little clues to who passed through different certain areas. There's kind of a bit of that as you're making your climb. Um, so themes around community, themes around, um, inhabiting a dying planet and what do we owe to it? How do we continue surviving when there are changes happening beyond our control? What are people's ties to land and what might make some choose to stay while others want to leave? Um, so I think all of those things are tied up in it, as well as just genuinely coming back to kind of human connections to nature and how we need the earth just as much as the earth needs us to be in balance and not necessarily feel as though we have a right to take ownership over it.
Mm.
If I were to try to condense
Oh, that's
it.
awesome. Um, I think with Chants of Sennaar, the story like, are you ever given a motivation for your character in that game, at least at the outset?
At the outset, no, not until the very end, really, are you
Right.
given your purpose and
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember, like, in the very beginning, you kind of just wake up, you're on this island with this tower, and you just start ascending the tower. Like, the only objective that you know is that you need to ascend the tower. But to do that, you have to understand the languages being spoken to be able to navigate conversations and environmental puzzles properly so that you can continue to move through the space.
Mm.
And the just, similar to the Tower of Babel, essentially, the tower has been broken up into several different communities. The communities have each been isolated from each other for so long that they have lost the ability to communicate with each other. They each have their own language
Mm.
and their own culture. And there's a bit of even like disdain for the other
Mm.
communities. And there's like a hierarchical nature to it as well. So there's the a community that's above another community has some disdain for the community below
Mm.
them, but a reverence for the community above them, and
Mhm.
viewing the community above them as, like, more, like, ascendant beings or,
Totally.
like, they're closer to gods, and the people
Mhm.
below us are, peasants, so, like,
Right.
not
Or they're
not
like
anyone we should associate with.
the tainted, or they had a
The
word for it, like
tainted, yeah.
yeah, something
They
like that.
each of the communities, yeah, have different words and phrases too that they use to describe the groups above and below
Mhm.
them and how they view them. Even though for the most part, as you work your way up the tower, there's also different levels of understanding about who created the tower, why anyone's
Mm.
here, what the different groups' purpose is. Each culture has their own um religion, so to speak, even though it's not all
Right.
about God. Like the first level community that you interact with, they're very religious. And they're called devotees, and they are there
Mhm.
to pray to the god that they believe lives at the top of the tower, and to serve God. And they have churches and abbeys and stuff like that. They're very religious, and then you move into a more militarized community, and they believe that it's their job to keep the like unwashed masses of the devotees out and
Mhm.
separate from the musicians, the bards and the artists that live above them. And they believe that art and culture is very revered. And as military people, they're not able to do that, but their job is to protect the higher levels of the
Mhm.
tower. And as you move up, but then the artists completely think that the military folks are just like
Like
grunts who
brutes, yeah.
brutes who should not be listened to or like and just exist to be made fun of, even though the guards like so like revere the artists so much. So it's
Mhm.
really interesting as you move
Yeah.
through the tower how the different cultures perceive each other, and just this complete breakdown in perceiving the other groups as full complete humans
Mhm.
who have lives that are worth anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like a pretty I think what you would expect if you have any familiarity with the Tower of Babel as like a parable, this idea that man tried to build a tower to ascend to God, and in the process lost the ability to communicate with each other, or to the point of complete dysfunction so that the tower can never reach the heavens.
Mm.
Which is it's biblical, right? I think the Tower of Babel is like a story in the Bible,
Yes.
but I think
Yeah.
it very much like stands as a parable of like by trying to ascend above other humans, or this idea that we can reach godliness by
Mhm.
constantly looking up, we lose the ability, we end up fractioning ourselves and losing the ability to communicate with each
Totally.
other. Um,
Totally.
and the game really leans into that in terms of all of the themes and uh, message of the game.
Mhm.
And it's another game similar to Sea of Stars that has an excellent, like, true ending that you can achieve. So
Yes.
you can work through the game and really just work towards that goal of ascending the tower yourself and getting to God at the end of the tower. Um, and you'll get one ending of the game, but if you kinda go back and do more, you can get what I think is, like, a much better and the quote, unquote, "true ending" of the game.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Is there anything else you wanted to add on Chants of Sennaar in terms of
No,
the
yeah.
story, or did I encapsulate it?
No, I mean, you encapsulated it beautifully, and I think if I were to add anything else, it's just sort of, I guess, just building upon the point you already made about how having literal walls between people, or speculating about others in your own communities and not ever seeing people as they are or letting fear rule your perception of others, I think is really something to be meditated on with this game. And like the more we talk about it, I think it's like an important game to play during a time like now where people are so um, influenced by
Mhm.
narratives coming from oppressive or colonialist parties and letting those narratives drive judgments of others and allowing things like genocide to take place. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's just a profound game for this time that we're in. Even though it's based on a story that's thousands of years old, it's still relevant to how
Mhm.
humans see each other today.
Yeah.
So I know the developers could have no way of knowing that this game would be completed right now, but just it really, I don't know, it's just important, important themes to think about and play through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna come back with both games to talk more about kind of parallels to, modern society, like, current society, and how I think both games are reflecting on that, but,
Mm,
I think with both of these games, the gameplay and the puzzle, like, the way puzzles show up in the game, I don't know, I've played a
mm,
lot of puzzle games, or at least a decent number. They're not always my favorite type of games, and just as a
yeah.
comparison point, last weekend, I just played Cocoon.
Mm,
And
mhm.
Cocoon is an excellent puzzle game, but I also, and maybe I totally missed it, maybe it was lost on me, I don't wanna shit on Cocoon, but I didn't find there was any, like, higher meaning to Cocoon.
Mm,
Like, Cocoon
mhm.
is very much about the cool art, the cool vibes, and solving cool puzzles, and I feel like that is what a lot of puzzle games do, and that can be perfectly fine if that's what you come to puzzle games for. But I really love how both Jusant and Chants of Sennaar are using the puzzles and the puzzle mechanic as a way to tell, like, to carry something way more profound forward in terms of not necessarily narrative, because I don't think
Mhm.
either of these games have a super strong linear story that they're telling, but in terms of um, conveying themes and reflections on society and human culture and what it means to be human
Yeah.
in today's world, and exploring that through a puzzle mechanic
Mm,
is really fucking cool. So the gameplay is, like, always important with games, but, like,
yeah.
super important in both of these games.
Yeah.
Do you wanna talk a bit about what the actual minute to minute gameplay is like in Jusant and what resonated with you
Yeah.
in that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as we sort of alluded to earlier, I mean, part of the genius of Jusant is just how much the act of controlling your character and interacting with the game defines it's just part of the immersive quality of the game. Like, some would say that climbing might be some of the most annoying or difficult mechanics in most games, and Jusant made a game that was totally about climbing. You are doing it constantly, and not only that, but also I lied earlier. I said I played it with a keyboard and mouse. I didn't. I played it on my PC with a PS5 controller.
Okay, okay.
Um, but it's like moving your hands and legs, gripping, letting go, reaching, all of these are, like, independently controlled with your triggers, right and left triggers, and your joystick, and so it's like you're truly immersed in the act of literally holding onto a rock, letting go with your other hand, reaching to the next rock, and there's no, like, autopilot, like, you are
Mhm.
constantly grounded in these physical actions via the controller, that is the closest I've ever felt to really climbing, down to the deep thought and intention that has to be put at each step of placing your body, managing your stamina, um, and continuing forward up a wall. Like if anyone has ever climbed, whether with rope or doing bouldering, which is like shorter walls that you're climbing with the intent of letting yourself fall when you've reached the top of, normally they're not higher than like 10-foot walls. Um, it really felt just like how it feel like I've done a little bit of bouldering myself, and you really are thinking like it's strategic about it's not just getting to the top of the wall. Like, you really have to plan your route ahead of time, because you know that once you're up there and gravity starts doing its work, you're gonna be fighting your body the whole way up, and you need to manage your energy, and also just be confident about if your placements, if you're gonna lose your grip, if you're not gonna be able to reach. Like, you really got to think about it. And I mean, this game did an unbelievable job of replicating that experience with the controller. And so, you've got a rope, you're connecting to points along these walls, you're progressing up higher and higher through this tower. Maybe one area is the ruins of a community, of a town. Maybe another area is inside, like caves. Maybe another area is these windy, rainy cliffs and that you're clinging to. Maybe another area is frozen and covered in snow and ice. And so the elements as well as the terrain just create these really interesting climbing puzzles. And the game is only a few hours long, so I think if this was 10 plus hours, maybe something like this would get a little tedious. But I think not only were the climbing puzzles beautifully designed, and in terms of how that you can interact with various elements of the environment, um, but it was the perfect amount of time to start to feel like you were able to master it without it becoming like too long. Like, it was just wonderfully paced as well. Yeah, did I miss anything from your observations of
No,
Jusant?
I don't think so. I did notice, when we were streaming it that there was some, and maybe I misinterpreted this, but it seemed like there were times where it was a little bit frustrating, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Like,
do you think that works for or against the game?
um, I think I think it's realistic.
Okay.
Like, and I think that that's a compliment. Like, I think, I mean, bouldering is one of the hardest things I've ever done, and there are certainly times where I would get very frustrated with just, like the wall never really gets easier. Like, you just get stronger, or you
Mm,
figure out how to strategize your way up there. And in a lot of, um, climbing gyms, like, they'll change the configurations every few days, and there's actually a word for it. Oh, it's escaping me, of course, as I'm talking about it now, but they have a word like bouldering, courses, like, they're called, like, puzzles or something. Like, climbers have a word for it, like puzzles or something like that. Um, and so when I was playing the game, like, yes, I was getting frustrated. Yes, we were on stream, so people can see me getting frustrated if they wanna go to our YouTube channel and watch our Jusant, Let's Plays. And it if anything, I felt like the people who built this game had real respect for the act of climbing, and were really bringing to life that it is one of the most physically challenging things the human body can do, and it
mhm,
also made it that much more rewarding when I was able to figure it out. I think it's interesting to think about, because I typically don't like Dark Souls games, for example. I don't like them. Roguelikes, for the most part, I don't like them, because I find it very stressful to be in these like high stress combat environments where things are coming at you, and it's like your heart is racing, and it's very what's the word, like, takes the confidence out of you, demoralizing to keep losing
mhm.
over and over again.
And if you fail,
Um,
you're losing a significant amount of progress.
yeah, that too, don't love that. And I find with this game that, like, it maybe because the main person I was competing against was myself,
Mm,
and it wasn't as if, the game was throwing things at me, or, um, like, it wasn't necessarily, like, a high stress environment in the same way, but it just felt almost meditative to get comfortable with that kind of failure. I'm not gonna say there were ever like, I'm not gonna say there weren't moments where I was frustrated. Okay, there were a couple of moments where it felt like, "Oh, I should have been able to grab that, and
mhm.
I wasn't able to," maybe almost like a bug kind of thing. That's frustrating, 100%. And I think that for what it was trying to do, it just really succeeded in that immersion, and if anything, it adds to the experience of the game. Again, because it's only 4 to 6 hours, like, if you can
Mhm.
push through, I think if anything, it's just very rewarding
Mhm.
to have it be difficult, um, because it's as much about the journey as it is about reaching the top, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I've made peace with it, but yes, there were moments that were very frustrating, and I think, it is a game that requires a bit of perseverance, and I think
Mhm.
even for me as someone who feels like I'm a pretty experienced gamer, having these mechanics be so grounded in the physicality of the body and gripping and releasing, it really humbled me in terms of my comfort with a controller because I really felt like I had to relearn how to control this game character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, it was really cool way to kinda subvert my expectations of what I was getting from a game. Like, I think it's always
Mhm.
really awesome and inspiring when developers think of new ways to kind of mix up the mechanics we're all used to and make something really fresh, and just opening the mind a bit more about what a game can do or how it can be played. Like, I do really feel like there should have been more recognition for this game this year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think it got nominated for any awards, but, like I said at the beginning, I have seen it pop up on several different game of the year lists,
Mhm.
mostly, uh, game lists that are highlighting indie games specifically,
Mm.
but, it's been nice to see it showing so prominently there on several
Mhm.
different of the publications and stuff that I follow. Um On the other side of the coin, though, I feel like Chants of Sennaar, got nominated at the Game Awards, but I haven't seen it showing up in as many indie game of the year
Yeah.
lists, which is
Yeah.
interesting that I don't know, just that dichotomy there. But to talk for a second about Chants of
Mhm.
Sennaar and the gameplay of that game. I said like the main thing that even though your objective is to move through the tower, you're not going to do that without translating language and understanding some of what people say to you. And the game does this through puzzles. As we said earlier, the all the language in the game, there's no spoken dialogue in the game. All of that when you interact or no voice acting, right? So when you interact with other
Right.
characters in the game world, they will speak, a little speech bubble will come up above their head, and there'll be these uh written
Glyphs.
words, glyphs that thank you for giving me the word that I was looking for. There'll be glyphs that appear in the speech bubble that are, unrecognizable to me as an English speaker or anybody approaching the game. These are just glyphs. You haven't translated them yet. Every time you encounter a new glyph, that glyph appears in your journal, which is basically in a menu that you can open in the game. And as soon as you discover a new glyph, as soon as a glyph is new to you, you have the ability to go into your journal and assign a word to that glyph.
Mm.
Basically, by just opening the keyboard on, me, I was playing on PlayStation, so just opening the little input keyboard on the PlayStation, or I'm assuming if you're playing on PC or something like that, it just opens and you just type it in. But you can type in whatever you think the glyph means as soon as you have some idea of what you think it might mean. And then when you encounter other characters or signage in the world that are using that glyph, instead of seeing the glyph in the speech bubble or on the sign, you'll see in italics the word that you think the glyph means.
Mm.
And the italics indicates that that's not yet confirmed. It's just what you think it is. I found that to be a super cool mechanic. I was, every time I encounter a new glyph, I was going into my journal and like I'd put in like several words like with
Yeah.
slashes like okay, I think this might mean this or this or this, so here's the slashes, and then that way you can see it in context when people are talking to you and help get a better sense of whether you're on the right track with a word. Um but once the game has presented a glyph or a set of glyphs to you enough times that it thinks been given enough context to definitively know what that word is, it presents you with a little puzzle in your journal that has drawings that represent the different words, and you have to do a little matching game to match the glyph to the drawing. And then if you match the correct glyphs to the correct drawings within a given set of pages in your journal, and successfully complete the matchmaking game, the game will essentially lock in those glyphs and it will officially confirm for you the exact word that those glyphs
Mm.
mean. So maybe I thought the word was river, but it was actually water, and the game will lock it in, but I still understood enough to be able to connect that glyph to the
Mhm.
picture of water in the book, and then the game confirms for me, yes, that is water. And now moving forward, when I encounter that word being spoken or written somewhere, the text in the game will actually just say, no longer italicized, water, anywhere that it appears, intermixed with other glyphs that I haven't translated or italicized words if they are glyphs that I've encountered and I've made a guess at their translation, but I haven't fully locked it in. And that process is it was just really fucking cool. You feel so fucking smart as you
Oh
start
my
to
god,
piece
you feel
things
like a
together.
genius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just something really I don't know, for anybody who's and I'm not fluent in any other languages besides English, but I took Spanish pretty extensively throughout high school. I've done Duolingo. There is something
Mhm.
really fun and cool about learning another language, recognizing words, and even getting to have, even if it's like a really broken conversation with someone who doesn't
Yes.
speak the same language as you, like through that barrier. It's like there is something like deeply and innately human and connecting about trying to do something like that or having an experience like that. Um, that like is I couldn't you can't even fully articulate like what's so special about that, and this game just like does it constantly throughout every moment as originally you approached a character and they said some things and you had no clue. There was no other context for what they might be saying. And then you spend time exploring the level and talking to other people and looking at other signs, and you slowly begin to piece together what the different words mean. And by the time you come back to that first character, suddenly everything they're saying is filled in and you fully understand them. And those moments are so
Mm,
great and revelatory and feel just like so connecting. And the
mm,
world of Chants of Sennaar, unlike the world of Jusant, is totally populated and alive. There's
mm.
characters everywhere doing things, living their lives. And they're not all necessarily like they're all saying things, they're all doing things that are going to help you decipher the language, but they feel like their own distinct. They don't just feel like a mechanism to solve the puzzle. Like they feel
Yeah.
like people living their lives and doing their own thing.
Mm,
And I think that just adds to the richness and the like how great it feels to actually solve the puzzles.
yeah.
Um the game also has like little side quest opportunities built in, characters who need certain things or who are looking for certain things. The process of getting the platinum trophy was really cool because there were certain things you could find or interactions you could see or make happen that popped the trophies, and so you got to like see it. I don't know, it was just like finding all of these little hidden things throughout the
Yeah.
world of a specific animal doing a specific thing or a person doing a specific thing, or there's a priest who's missing in the first chapter and you can find out what happened to him and it's
Mm,
tragic, but you can find that if you explore properly and like solve the right puzzles to get there. So all of that's very cool. And then uh there's like mandatory stealth sections as well. That's like kind of the only divergent piece of gameplay. Mostly you're
yeah.
just moving through the world, using your journal to translate the language, and then using that to ascend through the tower. And you don't have to sorry, I skipped over something. You don't have to
Mm,
translate everything in a given language to move up to the next community. It's not like this box checking thing. You can leave actually quite a bit untranslated if you want to. However, what I thought was so cool, if you leave things untranslated or unconfirmed, and you start to ascend, some of the words in higher languages, your understanding of those words are based on your understanding of the word in a
oh,
lower
shit.
tier language. So there might be a word or phrase that you learn in the first tier. And if you don't confirm that, like I had a word that I was all the way up in like the fourth tier and I had still never confirmed it. So because it was still referencing back to my original understanding of the word, it was
Mm,
still italicized anywhere I saw it. And I couldn't confirm the true meaning of that word
mm.
until I went back to the original community and found it and confirmed it and got it locked in, and then the game would
Wow.
filled in the
Yeah.
correct phrase for all the other words that were in that chain. So
Oh,
your
wow.
understanding of one language can be based on your understanding of other ones
Wow,
in a
interesting.
very, very cool way. Um, but that means that yeah, so the game doesn't force you or compel you to learn every single word in a language, but if you do, you'll just have a richer experience and you'll obviously be understanding what's happening around you better. But
Mm.
the actual translation of the language is your tool to move through the world. The uh it's not the objective of the game, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But coming back to those stealth sections, those are really kind of the only divergent gameplay from the puzzle, like the language puzzles.
Mm.
And I don't know how you felt about the stealth sections, but I thought they were perfectly fine. It was a nice like break in
I
pacing,
kinda
but
liked it, yeah.
yeah, it wasn't it was interesting to have them in there. They always made sense narratively, like why I had to stealth
Yeah.
through a specific area. They weren't so difficult that I was getting frustrated with them, but it also
Mhm.
was just like, I don't know, it was just an interesting other thing that was kind of thrown in the game
Yeah.
that you could take or leave. It wasn't anything I was like, "Oh, this is so good. This is the best part of the game," but it also kind of broke up
Mhm.
the rest of the gameplay.
It was
So,
nice to have a win when the translations were really kicking my ass and I felt like I was too dumb to continue. Those
yeah.
would give me a nice boost.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the the game and the, like, tutorialization of the game is so hands off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the developers really like, they barely tell you how to do anything or how to
Mm.
figure anything out, and you're really left on your own, and I think it's a testament to how well designed everything is that,
Yes.
like, 95% of the time, that works so seamlessly.
Mm.
I didn't feel like the game was too easy. I was just legitimately felt like I was getting the information and context clues that I needed, that I was solving things at the pace that the game wanted me to solve it. So when you do run into a wall, which does happen
Mhm.
periodically throughout the game, uh it was hard to tell if that was me or if it was a design flaw in the game. And those
Mm.
can it can be frustrating when you get stuck on a word and you just don't know what the answer is. And there's a few ways that you can cheese things with the journal a little bit in terms of plugging in, but that always felt really I hated doing that. I did do it a couple of
It
times,
felt
but
cheap,
it felt
but
cheap,
yeah.
right? Like to kind of cheat the system and it's
I did
like
that.
it's like, here's a page in the journal that's got 3 drawings on it. I have no
Yeah.
idea what these 15 glyphs that I have mean, so I'm just gonna plug every single glyph into
Yeah.
every single hole until I get the pattern right, and it confirms what these words mean for me. And I did
Yeah.
do that a few times, and it's hard to say if that was a design flaw in the game or if I just wasn't smart enough for the puzzles, but
Mhm.
interesting to hear that you struggle with that a few times too, and I think those are the only points where the game kinda sags a little bit because there
Mhm.
really isn't if you get hung up on something like that, there really isn't too much you can do except kinda go back through the world and
Yeah.
just beat your head against it and try to see if you can figure out what it is. But it's like if the context clues just aren't clicking for you,
Yeah.
there's no so the game maybe could have done with, like, a hint system or, just
Mhm.
something to help if you get stuck like that, but obviously, we worked around it, but that was definitely the
Mhm.
most frustrating thing that
Yeah.
I encountered in the game was if you didn't get it, you didn't really have any options for how
Right,
to get
right.
around it besides trying to look up an answer, on the internet or, trying to just, like, kinda beast your way through it with the journal.
Yeah. Let's just say if you're not someone who typically enjoys New York Times word puzzles, this might have a little bit of a learning curve, but the juice is worth the squeeze if you can power through.
Yeah. Um, so when it comes to, like, the overall design of the games, I guess with Chants of Sennaar, I've said, like, the tower feels so lived in, there's so much
Mm.
happening around you at any given time. There's something about that process then of solving the puzzles, like, it it really speaks to this way that or it really evokes the feelings of connecting with humans across barriers, across differences, and that, as we already said, is, like, a huge theme of the game. I pulled a quote from Emily Price over at Polygon, who wrote a review titled "When Puzzle Game Chants of Sennaar is on a roll, there's nothing else like it." And it's funny that that's the title because the first sentence of my quote is that exact same thing. So I'm not repeating myself, but this is the quote. Emily writes, "When Chants of Sennaar is on a roll, there's really nothing else like it. And when it gets tedious, it never remains so for very long. But I think fun is the wrong metric for this game. Is viewing ancient Egyptian sculpture fun? Is reading Ovid or Virginia Woolf? For that matter, is learning a language? Sometimes, but we do these activities to experience a different kind of pleasure, accessing a shared understanding of what it means to be human across barriers of time and interpretation." Chants of Sennaar folds every one of its puzzle solving bricks into a Rubik's Cube of a concept, and yet it revels most of all in panlinguistic understanding. The figure taking their break on a roof, or the grunted no from a security guard, or the laughter of a child playing hide and seek all serve to remind you of your place in a community. Learning a language stands in for observing and appreciating a culture that's unfamiliar to you. It's a lofty goal for a game, and it's one that Chants of Sennaar achieves.
Mm.
Um, so all of that world building just coalescing into this experience of moving through a space where you are very much an outsider to all of these cultures, and yet you can experience them. You can experience how different they are, and still find the human moments within each space, within each people, um, and even sometimes those human moments are, like, irritating. Like, I found the
Yeah.
artist community to be really like, when you first
Yeah.
arrive in the artist community, they all wear masks, and you don't like, your mask doesn't look like their mask, and they're just, like, laughing at you because they think
Mhm.
you're a guard, because you come from the lower tier where the guards were at.
Yeah.
And so they're just, like, really kind of rude to you as you're trying to figure out
Mhm.
their language. And that comes across even before you understand what they're saying. You
Totally.
understand that you're being laughed at, that you're being talked down to,
Mm.
that they don't think much of you, that they don't really wanna engage with you. Uh, Being able to convey all of that stuff despite language, it just captures something really, yeah, really deeply human that
Mm.
I haven't
Mhm.
seen a game do before in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like, especially considering how, um, the art itself and the character models aren't particularly detailed, like, it's so much is communicated with shape and body language, but the fact that we're all able to universally connect with these models and understand and pick up on, societal norms and being an outcast and being made fun of versus being reached out to for help or being played with or like just it's just the fact that I don't know, we're all so sensitive to these things that even beyond language we can still sense um these micro interactions. Like, I don't know, it's just really cool how much they were able to convey with arguably like very little detail, like
Yeah.
sketches really of characters, like
Well, and I think it showcases how I think we take for granted a lot of the times how much we as humans are like we have evolved to understand so much about another person based on things like body language, like
yeah,
visual cues from the other
yeah,
person without understanding anything the other person is saying.
mm,
And yet we've taken so much of our communication and the way we talk to each other online into a
mm,
place where the only thing that you see from another person is what they've typed into a screen
mm,
with
mhm,
no like just I don't know, it just really had me thinking about how much of the way we connect as humans is grounded in our ability to like be in physical proximity to each other
mm,
and pick up on those innate cues like the sound, just tone of voice, body language, uh physical presence, how we're holding ourselves, carrying ourselves, how we're interacting with each other, what we're looking at, what we're focusing on, what we're listening to. The other aspects of our culture, like what we prioritize, what the things that are in our home, what kind of art is
mm,
available to us. Like all of these things say so much about us as people and individuals and communities and cultures, and we've cut so much of that off in the way
mhm,
that we actually interact with each other, at least especially across difference,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Especially across like when we're talking about vast, large, Twitter,
yeah,
X as like being
yeah,
this huge communication platform, and yet there's so little humanity in how we interact with each other on Twitter.
yeah,
There's really nothing beyond the language, beyond the words, and how prioritized that has become in terms of how we relate to each other
mm,
and how isolating and probably dehumanizing that has inherently been when you consider how much communication can happen without words or how
mhm,
much communication does happen without words.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Um, but turning that back on Jusant too, a game that, the design of that is very much like I guess what's interesting to me about Jusant is, like, how much do you feel the process of climbing the tower, like the actual mechanics of the game, are conveying the themes of Jusant, because so much of the world building in Jusant, or at least what I perceived or picked up on, is about it's about climate change. It's about I guess what I felt it was chewing on was this idea of, or at least how it relates to what we're going through right now, is like what it feels like to actually to lose resources, to
Mhm.
lose access to resources, and the impact that that has on destabilizing a community,
Mhm.
destabilizing a populace, and actually displacing people. As we
Yeah.
experience climate change and the dramatic impacts of climate change, and how that's going to actually like this culture, this people is gone because of the
Mhm.
impacts of climate change, because their culture was built around the water and the tower
Right.
and how they
Right.
existed there. But I feel like
Right.
so much of that comes through in the letters in Jusant, and I wonder
Yeah.
how you feel the themes connect to the actual, like, climbing mechanics, or do they?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I do think it comes through more in terms of what you're observing as you're climbing. Like, maybe you're using, um, this giant crane to climb across a gap, and then as you spend more time traversing it, you realize, like, "Oh, this crane was used to, like, gather and stack blocks of salt, and so I can collect that. Oh, this community had rich farming and commerce around the what the ocean produced for them." Or maybe you're as you're climbing, you pass through the ruins of like a restaurant or a community gathering space. You see remnants of like pottery and other types of handcraft, and so I think I don't necessarily feel as though the climbing was telling me much about the world building. It was more like, the environment that I was climbing through told more about the people that existed there before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Both of these games have this through line of ascension. Like
Mm,
you're moving from the bottom to the top through the space and through a community, and or like through communities, I guess, in the case of Chants of Sennaar. And like I just wondered if that, like, is that process of the climb functioning as a narrative device at all in either of these? And I think it does in Chants of Sennaar, because you're seeing that, like,
mhm.
hierarchy of the communities, and you're moving through them, and you're actually building on your knowledge base of the world as you move through those spaces. I was just curious if you notice that in Jasant, as yeah, that ascension
Yeah.
actually being part of the themes and narrative device of the game.
It's interesting, like, as we're talking about it, I feel like Jasant very much tells a story or makes a case for collectivism and how much communities need each other, how much people need each other, and maybe if you don't fully understand each other, if you're able to respect and celebrate each other and see the ways in which we all can serve different and equally important purposes, like that's important to consider and to let differences exist without feeling a need to control or change them. On the other hand, I feel like the mechanics in Jasant, if anything, serve to highlight how alone this character is. Like,
Mhm.
um, in Jusant, there's not much music. Like, most of the time, you are listening to the sounds of your character struggling to breathe as they're gripping and climbing up this treacherous face. If anything, the mechanics in Jusant show the almost insurmountable, immense feeling of climbing this tower and how massive of a task, how, like, Sisyphean the task is, and how, like, the aftermath, the consequence of human action or inaction that led to this climate crisis, what the cost of that is. Like, you are completely alone, and you are a tiny person, um, trying to traverse this natural challenge that has been exacerbated by the lack of human care, resulting in this climate crisis and this extreme weather and this barren landscape. And like there are times where, as you continue climbing, you see more and more of what's below and how empty it is, how desolate it is, how in the distance you can see like the remnants of ships or people who tried to get out and maybe perished out there in the desert that's surrounding this tower. And so if anything, the more you progress, the more you see just the immense cost of what everything has resulted in, and it just drives home, like, how much has been lost. Um, so it's interesting as we're talking about it, I feel like it's really made me think about the juxtaposition there. Like, if anything, it feels like Chants of Sennaar is a bit more like the redemptive, um like things get more hopeful as the game progresses,
Yeah.
whereas Jusant does a bit more of like, um, it's a lot more bittersweet and a lot more reflecting on the loss than it is
Mhm.
the like there is hope. I will say at the end of Jusant, there is hope for the future, but it's just a lot more grounded in the loss of life and loss of nature.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, as you're describing it, I'm just hearing, like, what sounds like something that's like, one of the things you're meditating on is the grief of what we
Mm,
are actively losing or what will be lost,
mm,
um,
mhm,
because of the ramifications of climate change.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I think Chants of Sennaar, if you just finish the game and don't go for the true ending, it's pretty
Oh, yeah, it's
depressing.
kinda bleak, yeah.
But I think, the game really sings in that last third, I would say, maybe
Mhm,
quarter, if you go for that true ending because I don't want to spoil anything, but basically what that last section of the game focuses on, if you move towards the true ending, is reconnecting the communities.
mhm,
Once you've ascended the tower and you do understand all of the languages, there's very much a message in that game about uh, first of all the isolating impact of technology. That definitely becomes a theme as you move through the levels and the impact of technology. So I definitely think the comparisons to our current existence being so connected to others through the internet, being so connected to others through
mm,
awful social media platforms like X, um,
mhm,
like and the negative impact that has on us. Part of the ending of that game is deconstructing that connection and rebuilding actual human connections. You go back to work as like a translator basically between different communities, and I got very emotional
mm,
as the player, like connecting people across the different communities who needed things from each other, who could benefit from uh being with each other, and the positive impact that then has on the world that you've spent, 8 to 10 hours moving through. And now you have this opportunity to heal some of these things by creating connections between humans and
yeah,
helping them understand each other again. Um, was super beautiful, but that's also like really hopeful and maybe even pie in the sky for where we're at now. Like
mm,
Chance of Sonar makes it seem very simple, and it's
mhm,
definitely not. It's not. The game doesn't have the space or maybe even the interest in highlighting the complexities of that, like
yeah,
Chronicles of, oh my god, Salty Chronicles, and the
mhm,
way that game really tries to get into the minutia and the nitty-grittiness of trying to create multicultural
mm,
spaces. Chants
yep,
of Sennaar isn't doing that, but it is saying something really beautiful about, like, okay, what if we got rid of some of this harmful technology and tried to reconnect as humans? And
yeah.
what that might look like, and so it ultimately has a very hopeful message in that regard.
Yeah, if anything, I feel like if Chants of Sennaar is if its ultimate message is around returning to human connection, I feel like Jusant's ending speaks more to this idea that, um humans need to rescind control of the
Mm,
earth and stewardship of the earth back to the natural world and step back. Like the time of humans is almost like over and it's time
mm,
to return power to nature, the actual stewards of the earth who know how to take care of it and be untouched by human influence is almost
Yeah.
kind of what I took away from that. Um, so it's interesting. Like the
Mhm.
juxtaposition of these two games is pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. Do you think people should play these games?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, they're short and sweet. They manage to in those short amounts of time really um offer new ways, new mechanics for like refreshing. They feel really refreshing and new in what they're doing. And so like I think they're great kind of in between games, like between two longer games. If you need like a palate cleanser, they're really fun and just I guess cozy. I guess they're cozy. I think they're challenging games in different ways, but
Yeah.
they're rewarding.
Mhm.
It felt good to play them.
It did. Well, I didn't play Jusant yet, but I would like to get back to it. It's so hard. There's
You
so
feel
much.
you feel accomplished after playing
Yeah,
these games, like,
yeah.
they really give.
Maybe that's where some of that tower climbing comes in.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we hope folks will enjoy this conversation and that you'll go check out Jusant and Chants of Sennaar, two smaller games that absolutely do deserve your attention in this very busy year of
Mm,
video games. But time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you all for tuning in. And we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can sign up for free to stay up to date on everything we have going on, including our weekly streaming schedule, or subscribe for as little as $2 a month and snag those sweet monthly bonus episodes. We will be live streaming video games on Tuesday and Thursday this week and most weeks at 8 p.m. Eastern Time over on Pixel Therapy Pod YouTube channel. So give us a subscribe over there and ring that bell to get notifications every time we go live. And of course, you can also support the show by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts and following us on Twitter at Pixel Therapy Pod, even though we just spent several minutes shitting all over that platform. It is unfortunately necessary to exist as content creators in this
yeah.
day and age. So that stuff is important and we do appreciate it just as much.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. This week, I'm telling y'all about the Anti-Police Terror Project, which can be found at antipoliceterrorproject.org. They are a Black-led, multiracial, intergenerational coalition that seeks to build a replicable and sustainable model to eradicate police terror in communities of color. They support families surviving police terror in their fight for justice, document police abuses, and connect impacted families and community members with resources, legal referrals, and opportunities for healing. There's also a bail fund going on right now for anti-genocide protesters who have been affected in the Bay Area. So you can check out more about this organization, donate, and get involved at antipoliceterrorproject.org.
Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more
Pixel
Pixel
therapy.
Therapy. Bye bye.